The religious proposition is human beings are made in the image of God. And if you just took that apart philosophically and tried to understand what it meant, it would mean that, well, there's some ultimate source of what constitutes value, and that's at least in part what God is, the ultimate value, and that human beings are to be regarded as reflections of that ultimate value. And that's the proposition that we have intrinsic worth, regardless of our status, right? And it's a miraculous proposition. It flies in the face of what's obvious, because what's more obvious is, if I'm stronger than you, I can push you over. If I'm smarter than you, why shouldn't I have everything? And why doesn't might make right? And if you're weak, you're useless. And if you're powerful, well, it's not like you're worthwhile exactly. It's just that there's no reason for you not to have everything. That's a way different set of propositions than the idea that, even the least among us are made in the image of God. And so that's one key proposition. So imagine now you're trying to figure out how to deal with other people, treat them like you would want to and need to be treated. Well, one of the things you have to figure out is, well, if you're being good to yourself, including your future self, right, including the you that's going to exist down the road, and you were doing the best you could for yourself, how would you treat yourself? And what would you need and want? And if you're unsophisticated and cynical and hedonistic, you'd think, well, I want what I want when I want it now. And I don't think that's in keeping with this notion, because as we all know, if you fall prey to momentary temptations, which is very much akin, by the way, to worshiping false primordial gods, then you're going to act impulsively and foolishly, and that isn't going to go very well for the future you, tomorrow you. Remember this Simpsons episode where Homer whips up this quart jar of mayonnaise and vodka and downs it, and Marge says, "Do you really think that's a good idea?" And Homer says, "That's a problem for future Homer." And yeah, no kidding, it's so funny. And everybody who has had a hangover has, fallen, especially if it's like your 200th hangover. It's like, perfectly well you've sacrificed future Homer for like present Homer. And you also know, it's not a very good game. And alcohol is a particularly good example of that, because, you see that in the figure of Barney in The Simpsons. You can wreak a lot of havoc in the medium to long term with the short-term hedonic impulsive pleasure of alcohol intoxication. And you can do that with most embodied temptations, like sexual promiscuity is a good example too, or other forms of pleasure-seeking drug use, impulsive behavior in general. That's not selfish exactly. It is selfish because it's all about you, but it's selfish and stupid because it's all about you in the moment, and that's what makes it both selfish and stupid. If you were really take care of yourself, as you know perfectly well, you wouldn't do stupid things that hurt you next week or next month or next year or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, or maybe you're starting to save for your pension, when you're 30, and that's because 65-year-old you should be part and parcel of what? The community of selves that you're taking care of across time. And I don't think there's any difference between doing that properly and treating other people properly. I think they're exactly the same thing. If you think of yourself as a community that stretches across time, you're going to be in a lot of different situations. You're going to be a lot of different people. You're going to be in a lot of different ages. You're going to be in a lot of different relationships. And that's you because you have some continuity, but man, it's a pretty damn diverse you. And then to regard yourself optimally, you have to regard yourself across all those time spans. Now, maybe you should take a little more care for right now because It's more predictable and controllable, but, you know, you can't just make it all about what you want in the next 30 seconds. You know, you're a 2-year-old then, because 2-year-olds aren't very good at acting in accordance with their extended self, and they're also not very social. Kids really don't get social in the technical sense till they're about 3. 2-year-olds can't share, you know. They want the toy, and you can understand that because it's their toy, but it makes them kind of hard to get along with. So, and that, you know, that points to something that also indicates that the claims of moral relativists they're fundamentally, they're wrong. They're unsophisticated, they're wrong. They're naive, and they're, I think, driven generally by a desire to justify kind of impulsive hedonism. So anyways, you should regard yourself as a being characterized by intrinsic worth, and then you should take upon, and by should, I mean if you don't do this, then all hell will break loose. That's what I mean by should. It isn't like I'm saying that's what you should do, because it's like an arbitrary duty. That's not the point here. The point is that if you don't do it, there'll be various forms of hell that you will wander into and bring other people with you as you journey, and you'll also sacrifice the hope in your life. So it's a bad idea. Okay, so now you treat yourself like you're someone worth taking care of, and then you extend that courtesy to others. Now, why would you do that? Well, first of all, as I said, you're kind of a community that stretches across time in any case. And second, well, if it's all about you, how's that going to work out for you? Like, there's 2,300 people in this room, and you're going to interact fairly intensely with about 1,000 people in your life, and, you know, first-degree relationships, and then second-degree relationships with about 1 million, you know, the people who know the people you know. And if you don't play fair, generously and productively in a reciprocal manner, if you don't treat people like they have intrinsic worth, the word's going to get around real fast, and no one's going to play with you. And that's not going to go so well for you. And so even if you were making this all about you, but let's say the extended and sophisticated you, you're still stuck with the same problem, which is you better make the presumption that other people have a value that's equivalent to your own, or suffer the consequences.